Hi, and welcome to another episode of Haltech Heroes. Today we've got a Bedford, we've got a Barra, we've got Millsi Mendoza. We're going to get it on the dyno, so let's get into it. So James, Millsi, or James, mate, thanks so much for stopping past with the Bedford. Such a peculiar car, high performance, van. Tell us, mate, where did this adventure start?
A good friend of mine had the van, and I was looking at a motorbike west of Brisbane, and he said, can you call in and have a look at the van? I said, yeah, no worries. I had a look and got my mind ticking over, and I was starting a lawn mowing business at that time, and thought that might be something a bit different as opposed to the usual sort of high-ace van to have. So made a ridiculous offer and he accepted. So yeah, home it came.
You bought this thing. What motor did it have originally?
Red 202. Yep.
Not very inspiring.
Not very inspiring, and had a Trimatic as well. The shifter was sort of back and down, a bit of an aftermarket add-on.
So converted already? Is that a conversion engine that was in this?
No, so when Holden bought them from England back in the 60s, 70s and 80s, they came over with no engine. They were fitted in Britain with a Vauxhall 4-cylinder. They came over with no engine, and Holden decided that they'd put a 202 in for Aussie conditions.
You used it for the lawn mowing. What happened? You filled it up and it didn't have enough power to move?
I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment when it comes to projects. I know some people are like that, and I hadn't actually driven the van, and I got hold of my good mate Al and Woody, also up at Skid Factory, and Al said put a 1JZ in it. He also said that if you want to make big power easy, put a Barra in it. So sorry Al, I went with the Barra.
So under the hood we can't really see that much, but that's to be expected. Most of the work gets done from inside the cabin. So the actual engine is from a Ford Falcon FGX. So that's the latest model of the Ford Falcon series. It's the 4-litre Barra. It's turbocharged, got a GT 3582 Gen 1 turbocharger that's mounted down underneath. We've got a Toyota 86 brake booster and master cylinder. The guys have used that because it's super narrow and there's not a lot of room in the front of this thing. It's got the radiator overflow. We've got a normal aluminium radiator down here. It's got a front mounted intercooler. It's even got an AC condenser, and I know that the guys are planning on commissioning this in the next little while, so this thing will even have air conditioning. It's got the factory airbox for the heater, which fully works, so in the middle of winter, this thing's nice and warm. In the middle of summer, it's also nice and warm because the engine's right in the middle of the cabin. Is it going to return to duty? Is it going to get mowers in the back again?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. My plan with this was always not just have a car that goes fast in a straight line. I wanted to be able to drive it to work occasionally, throw a motorbike in the back, take the kids out to the beach and that sort of stuff, multi-purpose.
Multi-purpose roll cage as well, because I saw all those tie-down points now. Mint.
Yeah, so my brother, Dave at Miller Chassis, he's a bit of a gun with that sort of gear, and he put a pretty good cage in it, 8-point, so it's been teched, so we'll see how it goes.
And what are your plans for it? What are you thinking? First pass, what are you thinking?
Look, I'd like to say that I'm just going to be reserved and see how it goes off the line, but I'll probably get carried away and just stay into it.
I think everybody says that. Do a licensing pass, figure out what's going on, but then before you know it, it's out the back door.
Yep. Yeah, hopefully.
And it's got a cage, it's got the brakes, is it going to have a parachute?
140 miles an hour, obviously. I don't know if it's going to get there, to be honest. I think it might go close, but I think being a bit of a brick, I might get held up top end.
This could be one of the biggest 140 mile an hour cars in the country, I'd say.
Possibly, yeah, absolutely.
Inside, it's pretty much what you expect, a Bedford van. But it's got a few differences that kind of don't really fit in here. We've got a stock Bedford steering wheel, a stock Bedford steering column that actually comes down on a funny angle. It's got Ford Falcon brake pedal and electronic throttle accelerator pedal. Pretty normal for a Bedford, not really. It's got the Ford FGX shifter assembly. So this thing's got a cable that goes down into the gearbox, as well as all of the CAN-based communication stuff that lets the ECU communicate with the shifter that communicates with the gearbox. Originally, the Bedford van only had a really basic instrument cluster and not much over on the passenger side. Whereas this thing's got a full fiberglass dash that houses a full-size stereo. It's got a nice glove box area that just needs a glove box lid over the top to finish her off. It's got an AIM dash that communicates with the Haltech CAN network in here. So this AIM dash is displaying all the information from the engine management system and from the automatic gearbox. So we know what gear we're in, we know our oil pressures, our fuel pressures, our engine RPM, all of that stuff all communicates. So he's got all of his warning lights as well, so he knows if anything's gone wrong. Underneath this cover here is where the action actually is. The Barra engine is sitting right here. We've already loosened a couple of bolts off it, so we can pull it across to one side and have a bit of a look and see how close you are to the action. Now, I'm certainly a whole lot more comfortable in this Bedford than its original owners were, and it's probably because of these Toyota 86 seats on the custom rails. They go back and forward. The electric heater might start working soon. Hey, super comfortable and pretty safe. Cosmetically, this thing is different to most of the cars that we see. Is this an effect? Is it real? What's the story?
I'm a sucker for different. That's just me. And with the paint, the van is about 40 years old, so there was some rust issues. So what we did, a good mate of mine, Troy and I, we cut the main bits of rust out, repaired that properly, and then a good friend of his painted the panels. But instead of going like a normal clear over base coat, we used some clear coat in with the base coat.
Right.
Sprayed it on top, let it dry, and then he used some special rust effect paint to then create the rust runs.
Right. So we could actually talk about it in a different way and say that, so this thing had bare, clean, nice panels on it. Oh, within reason. Then we've protected them, put some clear in the base coat. So that's it. Normally you could kind of finish there, but then you've laid this effect over the top.
Exactly. And it was quite surreal watching him get a toothbrush and flick iron filing paint on the car and then spray it with acid.
Give us some of the things. What's like the hardest thing you came across when you were doing this?
I think probably the biggest thing was that most Bedford people don't go down the performance route. I guess they're more into, shiny panels as well as plush velour interiors and that sort of thing. Not the way I like to roll. So I think it was trying to find out off them what parts fit where. And the electrical system was a bit of an issue, trying to find a lot of new old stock parts. Very difficult.
So fitting the engine in, similar size, similar gearbox size?
Alan Woody are going to hate me, but I wasn't there for it, so I think it fitted in just fine.
Straight in?
Yeah, straight in.
Just slaps straight in?
So I think it was on the Skid Factory video where the 202 and Trimatic combo was the exact same length. But unfortunately, that's where the similarities ended. There was a lot of fab work. And Matt from 5 Metal Custom did a lot of work behind the scenes with engineering requirements and that sort of thing as well.
Because this thing is fully engineered in this country?
Yeah, it's fully engineered in Queensland and fully registered, so keen to actually drive it.
So to do that, what sort of brakes did you need?
Yeah, so we used a off-the-shelf kit from an Australian company.
A Bedford van off-the-shelf kit?
Yep, I am not kidding. So it basically utilises Series 3 AU Falcon, best Falcon ever made, to brand new calipers, and it obviously got the adapters and everything else for there. So yeah, it works quite well.
Rear end? Was that a whole assembly with brakes?
When I bought the car, it had the Chevy 12-bolt diff in it. I know not too much about those. So what we did was pulled that out and sent it off to the diff shop and basically did this. Came back with a brand new diff except the housing, everything's new, torsion LSD. The brakes for the diff came from Jegs and they were really, really helpful. So
under here you can see that there's a heap of fab work in this car. The thing's got a full stainless 4-inch exhaust system, comes through a catalytic converter into 2 mufflers. It's got a stainless steel dump pipe here straight out of the wastegate. The turbocharger is very interesting. It's backwards. So the exhaust housing is more towards the front of the car, compressor housing towards the rear. They've done this for fitment because the exhaust system wasn't going to fit over this side of the car because the fuel tank's there, needed to go over the other side. So the guys got fairly creative, and instead of using a stock Barra turbo exhaust manifold, they've gone for an aspirated exhaust manifold, then managed to make the turbocharger fit on the end of that. So that's backwards, pretty rare. It's also extremely low. So the guys have fitted an oil pump here as a scavenge pump. So what happens is the oil drains out of the turbocharger into this custom-made little pan. We've also got the oil catch can draining down into this in case there's any oil overflow. Then goes through the pump and then gets fed back into the sump. Over this side, it's also got the Haltech boost control solenoid to take care of the turbocharger boost pressure when we get it on the dyno. On the other side, it's got the fuel system. So it's got twin Aeromotive 340 litre per hour fuel pumps. It's got a Haltech flex fuel sensor. So we do plan on running this thing on both petrol and on ethanol. Because the exhaust system now comes out this side of the turbocharger, that means that the intake system, the 4-inch intake, is coming out the back, does a big U-turn, goes up over through some pretty fancy pipe work all the way to the air filter that sits right behind the front bar. Up here we've got the ZF transmission that we spoke about before with the billet input shaft. It's got the tiny tail shaft, so we're used to seeing one that's much, much longer in the Falcon. If we move down the back, it's got a Chevy 12-bolt with torsion LSD, makes it a limited slip style differential that's going to make putting the power down nice and easy. Well, Millsi, mate, it's been a pleasure and a real eye-opener to the Bedford van. Mate, thanks so much for stopping past and letting us have a look through it. No worries. Really appreciate it. As always, thanks very much for watching. My name's Scott. I'll see you next time.